And now, I'm pleased to introduce Emily Harrington, one of the many trailblazing women who are being celebrated through the Move Mountains campaign. Emily is a professional rock climber, skier, and adventurer who has traveled the world for over 2 decades, exploring remote places, climbing some of the most difficult rock faces, and summiting and skiing down the highest peaks in the world. In competition, she is a 5-time U.S. national championship and 2-time North American champion. After a decade of success in climbing competitions at the highest level, Emily's adventurous spirit has led her to blaze new trails in the mountains, notching first female ascents on some of the hardest technical routes around the globe, free climbing big walls, and summiting the world's tallest peaks. Please join me in welcoming Emily Harrington.
When I first started climbing, I was 11 years old, and I was afraid of falling. I was afraid of going too high. I was afraid of the air underneath my feet. I was afraid of basically everything that defined rock climbing. And I was so ashamed of that fear. Growing up, I was under the impression that girls were afraid and boys were not. So I set out to conquer that fear, to beat it. And you know something? I never did. I'm still afraid. I still get scared, just like everyone else. And I wish that as an 11-year-old girl, someone had told me, not, there's nothing to be afraid of, and fear is a weakness, but rather, you are afraid because you are human. And fear can be a strength, provided you give it a purpose. So now I try to give my fear a purpose. I try to accept it and use it to feed my determination and my motivation. Because with purpose, fear is no longer paralyzing. Fear is an asset. I've spent years climbing mountains and living on the sides of cliffs. And yeah, it's intimidating and it's scary and it's uncomfortable. But then, some mornings I wake up, and it's not that intimidating, and it's not that scary anymore. And that is an empowering process. And that's why I've chosen to live a life where I seek out discomfort and failure. I fail a lot. I fall over and over and over again. And then sometimes I don't. But I would never succeed if it weren't for the hundreds of thousands of failures that came before that. And I have these mantras that I try to tell myself. They are to be vulnerable, to embrace failure, and to accept fear, and to use those things. For me, I use them to climb mountains and rock walls. That's my vehicle for understanding myself, for connecting with others, for exploring my capabilities. So if I had to give any advice, it would be that. Find what makes you uncomfortable. Find what makes you fail. Find what scares you, and embrace those things. Learn and grow from them, because that is passion. And the world needs passion. The world needs people who are not afraid to be afraid. Thank you.